woman in the leadership space, have you ever had the advice, you need to be more assertive? You need to speak with more confidence. You need to speak more or louder. And yet, often that can be really difficult if it's not our natural way, but it can also be really difficult because of how that's perceived. Often it's well-meaning advice that we're given, but we walk in society this very fine line as a woman because we're told to be our authentic selves, right? And yet, if we are assertive, then often we get called aggressive, and that's a negative. And if we're not assertive, we're told we need to be more assertive because we can appear weak and we're a bit too kind and we might get walked all over. So there's this very fine line, all while being told we just need to be our authentic selves and everything will be okay. And that makes it a really difficult place to navigate, particularly for women and particularly if you're in the spotlight. And we only have to look at politicians, people in showbiz, anybody in who has fame, anybody in that celebrity space to see how this often plays out in the media negatively for the woman involved. And so what can we do? My advice is always, instead of being assertive, be authentic, be what is you. So the reason we might get the advice, be more assertive, is because that's how we see leaders. We see leaders as being in control, dominant, powerful, and often this is because when we look back in time, most of our leaders have been, and unfortunately still are, men. And so we look to a more masculine style of leadership where being assertive and dominant and controlling and powerful as kind of what we've had as the poster for leadership for way too many generations. And of course we have this double bind as women where we're judged by that standard, yet we're also judged by the standard of femininity. And a double bind is two conflicting judgments that for the same group, that means you can never win, because we can't be assertive and masculine and dominant whilst also being feminine and all the things that come with that in terms of how society perceives those things. So it can be a catch-22. It can be a really difficult situation to be in, which is why the advice is be yourself rather than anything else. Leverage the strengths that you have. So I'm not assertive. I'm much more on that other end of the scale. But how I demonstrate my strengths and how I've succeeded in leadership is by being myself, is to let my work do the talking. I'm never going to be assertive and dominant, but there's a quiet power that is at play when you're able to reflect, consider, when you're able to put your thoughts in writing rather than in the room at the time, out of your mouth, when you're able to get alongside people and support them, when you have high empathy and EQ, and it means you can listen and often hear the things in the room that are unsaid, or understand the dynamics between people that help you then impact and influence some of those same people. So I think there's so many skills that we have. Being assertive is only one skill, and I'd say it's probably not one of the most important ones when we see leadership. What we think, and this is based on an old model, what we think when we think assertive is dominance, power, control. But I'd flip that and say we use those words, but what we're actually looking for is impact and influence, and that can be done without being assertive. So for many of us, particularly depending on the culture we have come from, assertive doesn't feature as a strength. In fact, it can be quite a negative connotation, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you're younger. And so what are the other strengths and skills that you can lean into that mean you have influence over people and you can impact what's going on around you? Because this means that we show up as ourselves. We show up as genuine, congruent, real. It is absolutely exhausting, and I've been there, I've tried it, to try and be something that we're not. So when we leverage our strengths and we step into the power, and that is everything that we are, regardless of how quiet or loud that might be, that is where the rubber hits the road. That is where we get respect, and that is how we become successful leaders.